Greetings, traveler. My name is Xanthos. I've been working in the games industry for over a decade now, and today we're talking about game concepts, what they are, and how to make them for your game. So let's jump right in. So today we'll talk about why and when you use a game concept. We're going to talk about how to define a game concept for your game. And finally, we're going to talk about pitfalls you might encounter during this process and what solutions there are to get around them. So this is the first part of the game design phases process. I talked about the whole process in the previous video. I will leave a link down in the description below. If you haven't seen it yet, I recommend watching that first. But this is essentially the first part of the game design phases process, and it sets what kind of game we're making before we move on with the game design, and we define the vision of the game and the pillars and the features and so on. So let's start. Why use game concepts in the first place? Why don't we just jump in and start making features for our game? Well, the game concept sets the tone for the entire project. It tells you what you're making, what the game that you're going for is supposed to be. It will also inform all the elements in the following game design phases about what they should be like and what purpose they serve in this process. When do you use these game concepts? Well, you use them right at the beginning when you start working on a brand new game project. So this is the first thing you'll be making as soon as you decide that a certain type of game would be cool to make, and you will need a team to make it, and you will need documents and so on, all these things. Before you make all of that, it will pay huge dividends to sit down and create this one sentence game concept that will explain to everyone, and most importantly to you, what it is you're trying to make. It is used to convey the core experience during game pitches. So when you present the game to an investor or to your boss at your game company or your manager or basically anybody who asks what it is exactly you're working on, you can use that one sentence game concept to accurately describe it to them. So how do you define a game concept? How do you make it? So for me, there's two kinds of games when it comes to game concepts. One of them is the new take games, and the other one is completely original games that I'll talk about in a moment. What I mean with new take games is there is already a game out there and it exists and it's popular and everybody loves it. So what you want to do with your new game is to give a new take, a new approach to it. So when you create the game concept for it, you can easily describe it as it's like some game that's already popular, but with whatever element you want to introduce in the game. So some examples are, this game is like Shadow of the Colossus, but with dinosaurs, which would maybe result in a game like Monster Hunter, for example. Or it's like Mario with machine guns. So everybody, at least in the games industry, is familiar with Mario, the platformer version. And if you say it's with machine guns, then they imagine Mario using these guns to defeat all the enemies, and they get a pretty good idea of what it is you're going for. They know, for example, you're not going for a boat race kind of game. Another example is this game is like World of Tanks, but with battleships. Again, very clear. If someone knows the base game you're talking about, then talking about your twist on this concept is very easy for them to understand. On the other hand, if they don't know the base game, well, that is something you need to address. So either you can talk about the base game first, or you can describe your concepts in terms of a game they already know. So if you are talking about completely original games instead, and by original games I mean games that really don't have any other similar games out there. So it's not something like, it's like a FIFA game but with basketball, for example. We're talking about games that are so radically new in their design that talking about it in terms of another game would confuse the listener rather than, well, illuminate or inform them. So again, we're going to use just a very simple, very short phrase to describe it, but instead we'll talk about the experience only. So you might say something like, in this game you have to daily care for your own monster pet. So this is something, for example, for a Tamagotchi game. Or you roll random objects into a huge ball. This is for something like a Katamari Damacy type of game. Or you are a wizard who has to escape a dungeon. So maybe this is something for an Ultima type game. So of course, all games before they became popular and famous, nobody knew about them, nobody had seen anything like them before. So for every game type, there must have been a time where they had to create a sentence like this. So it's useful to have this design tool in your arsenal when you're thinking about how to introduce your original game idea. So as soon as you hear you're a wizard, okay, so pointy hat, spells, all that kind of stuff, who has to escape a dungeon. So he's in a dungeon for some reason, he's trapped there, for some reason he cannot use his magical teleportation abilities and whatnot, and he has to escape the dungeon. Of course, if he's a wizard, he's got all these spells, he's very clever, he's very wise and knowledgeable, so the fact alone that he has to escape a dungeon means that the dungeon is so difficult, so challenging, that it matches his ability. So if a wizard who is a very capable individual, I suppose, is having trouble with his dungeon, then this might be quite a dungeon. And this is not only a very short and concise way to describe the concept of the game, but it also hides the bonus of making the listener interested in this kind of game. So hopefully when somebody hears about this, they will have specific questions about what kind of dungeon, what kind of wizard, what can he do, why can't he just teleport, and so on. So here are some pitfalls and solutions for the game concepts. So the concept can be too vague sometimes. So an example for this is, well, when somebody hears a concept, they ask you, well, what do you mean? So if you said, for example, oh, my game is about football. Okay, but what's the unique take? What's the special mechanic of the game? Saying that it's just about football, it only leaves the listener with a question. So is it just a pure simulation of football, or are you trying to do something special with it? So if we're going with the wizard escaping the dungeon example, then the listener might ask, well, for example, why can't he just teleport out? Or what's so difficult about the dungeon? Or why don't the walls allow him to use his abilities and dig a hole out very quickly? So if the concept is too vague, when you explain it or when you introduce it to someone, you will get the what do you mean kind of general question, or like what kind of game, what do you mean by that? That sort of very, very, very general question. If you refine that concept, then you will start getting specific questions about the concept instead of general ones. So in the wizard example, you will get questions about the wizard or the dungeons and so on. If we say you roll random objects into a huge ball, then somebody might say, well, why do they stay together, or when do you stop, or can you roll the earth into a ball, or all these silly questions. But this is good because it's a silly game. It's supposed to be about this childlike fun. So all these questions are in the right direction. If you say you have to daily care for your own pet monster, they might ask, well, why doesn't it eat you, and what does it eat, and what do you have to care for it, and if you don't care for it, what happens? These are specific internal questions about the game. It's not a general question like, what do you mean by monster, or why are you caring for a monster kind of game. It has this internal interest element in it. And of course, it might be that a person really doesn't understand the concept because they're not familiar with the topic, that's fine. But at least for most people, you know you have a good game concept when you get specific questions more often than general ones. The other pitfall of game concepts is having a concept that's too specific. So, for example, you could say that this game is about a man who met a wolf with amnesia, and together they first decided to... You are very lost in the situation. You don't know if the game is about the man or the wolf or the amnesia part, or how they decided to do anything together, how did they communicate, and so on. There's too many questions, and new questions are introduced at a rapid pace as soon as you say every word in this very, very long description. So again, it's so specific, it's confusing because it introduces too many elements at once. A better way to write this is, this game is about a man befriending a wolf. So what do we have here? We have a man probably in some sort of a forest or wilderness environment befriending a wolf. Now, of course, normally people and wolves cannot communicate, so there is an inherent challenge in it. But since the concept is already stating that the man is befriending the wolf, then that means that this is the core of the game. This befriending process is the core of the game. So it assumes that this befriending process will happen, and this also raises a specific question. How? How does the man befriend the wolf? Does he give him food every day? Why didn't the wolf eat him? All these more specific questions, which are very good, because then you can jump in and talk about the specific features of the game, which are excellent topics to talk about when you talk about game concepts. It gets someone interested in the game rather than feeling confused or uninterested. So that's it for talking about game concepts. It's a very deep topic. It's something a lot of people talk about, and many people create entire documents talking just about the game concept. This is not to be confused with concept art for the game, which is of course very helpful to have. And when you don't have a game prototype or complete graphics, then the concept art really helps to put an image to the description you have for the game. But having just a simple, short, one-sentence description of the game will do miracles for you, for understanding the game and what you're trying to build ultimately, and of course for communicating this game concept to others. So I hope this is helpful to you. If you know someone who is struggling with coming up with a clear game concept, feel free to share this video with them, and perhaps they will find it useful. Otherwise, thank you for your time and have fun.